that brings us to our next question. Nikita from India has a question on how people often use the social media to portray how cool they are. Yeah, this is like a big thing, I think, these days, with the proliferation of social media in all our lives. Her question is on how to use social media to share happy moments without strengthening the need for superiority. I think it's a very interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a paper, an magazine article that came out in the New Yorker, maybe a couple of months back, that I am going to have Catherine post. It's on this set of findings that have shown indeed that the more time you spend on Facebook, for example, right, the more likely you are to be depressed. And I think that this need not be true for everybody. I think what happens is that when you go on Facebook, and everybody, I'm sure, at some level or the other can relate to this, you try and put your best foot forward.
Absolutely.
You select from among 100 pictures to select the best ones. If you've been to lots of vacation spots, you pick the pictures from the most exotic ones and so on. And so when you're basically exposing people to what might be called the right tail of the distribution of your life, all the fancy, beautiful things, right? Of course, sometimes people also kind of throw a pity party, which is the left tail, right? My husband doesn't, love me or whatever. But for the most part, it's from this right tail. And so when you look at Facebook, you come away with the impression that everybody's leading these fancy lives, Is it me, only poor me, who's like getting screwed? Of course, you kind of forget that you yourself have picked the fancy pictures from your own life to put up there. And so this leads to depression. You're exposed to people who are much better off than you are, it seems like, on all dimensions. And comparing yourself to them, you feel like, my life is worthless. I think the way to kind of not fall into this trap, right? And I think the tendency that most people have is a knee-jerk one, which is that, okay, if they've done this, gone to Italy for a vacation and Fiji, and their son is getting a chess championship or whatever, I'm going to now put up everything good that's happening in my life, which just fuels this whole race,
Yeah.
And I think that once you become conscious of this, that, okay, this is what is going on, this is the game, right? You recognize that, look, people are putting up things that are not necessarily representative of their whole life. They're putting up things that are kind of selected from a certain part of that distribution, and that I shouldn't read too much into it. And then you also become conscious, at least in my case, I become conscious that I don't want to make other people depressed. I don't want to fuel that feeling of inferiority and envy and jealousy. Why? It just doesn't make me feel good to make other people feel bad, kind of a thing. And so I end up deciding that I'm only going to put up things that have a very good chance of not being construed as being show-offish, Okay. And if everybody does that, and you recognize after some time when you operate from that space that you're able to see where people are coming from, and in the cases where you do recognize that, well, there is an attempt at kind of puffery or whatever you want to call it, it's understandable. People are coming. Doing that because they're coming from a space of needing that love, and so then you're happy to give it to them. When you like it, there's no longer this kind of grudging liking and saying that, but I'm even better than you are, check out my other photographs. It's from a position of, yeah, I want to support you, then it becomes a little bit easier. So I would think that it would be interesting to see. I'm not aware of any research that's looked at that, people who come at it from this position of understanding where other people are coming from, and whether it makes a difference to whether even those people feel depressed. I imagine that they wouldn't be, because they understand what's going on. So basically, it's a long answer, but I would say that so there's research showing that people who spend a lot of time there do feel depressed, and I think the way out of it is to recognize what's going on and also not propagate it. And so just be aware of what you put up and what effects it could have, and try and encourage a sense of non-comparison, especially on extrinsic yardsticks, and try and promote a sense of cohesiveness and love and lack of separation,
So you're talking about sharing from a more genuine, giving out positive information standpoint rather than this whole social media one-upmanship.
Yes.
That I'm doing better than you, or my life is somehow more, more interesting, more, I'm going to better places and all of that.
Right. Yeah, do it from a position of sharing the good things in it. It can be a very fine line, I think your intention is very important here. And if your intention is to spread wellness and happiness, even if other people don't say like what you put up, you won't be that affected, you know. Whereas if you're coming from, yeah, I want to show them that I've done better things, then you're going to be really affected by
number of likes
yeah,
and the number of yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like a very relevant point for the life we're living these days, and I hope that someone someday does research on this point and tries to find out that if you're actually coming from this slightly more elevated platform of just sharing
I
positivity.
wouldn't call it elevated, more compassionate.
More compassionate.
Yeah.
Well, compassion is a little better than being selfish. But still, yeah. Professor
Okay.
Raj is like just such a nice person.
No.
Wrong person to be interviewing here.
No. Okay, anyway, yeah.
Okay. Lavanya from India has a question for you. She's saying, isn't guilt too an important sin in robbing happiness? She's giving an example. She's saying, I can never take a pastry without feeling guilty. That's not just you, by the way. Can you tell me how to enjoy simple things without feeling guilty?
I think that it would be too much of an oversimplification to say that guilt is a sin, in the sense that, all emotions exist for a reason. Okay, and I think that if you're doing something that is jeopardizing other people's well-being or your own future well-being, an indication at a level of a visceral level, at a level of your bodily changes and emotions, that you're not behaving in a way that's consistent with your aspirations, which is what guilt. Guilt could be negative emotions arise because of that. Difference between where you want to be and where you are. Can actually be a good thing. They have a motivational power behind them and can steer you in the right direction. But that said, I think that a lot of us end up feeling guilty unnecessarily. I think that I referred to this some time back, and those who have seen week 2 will see the videos on the interview that I did with Professor Kristen Neff, on this idea of self-criticism. Kind of like beating yourself up for not living up to certain standards and so on. If you think about, you take that perspective of self-compassion, I think you'd realize that there is a reason why you end up eating those unhealthy but tasty things. The things that are high in fat and sugar. A lot of marketing that's going on around those, which make them very, very appealing. There's a lot of access to them. You don't have to work hard to get to them. Just a vending machine, or you go to McDonald's or whatever. There's a big poster. Very luscious looking cake or something. And that's what many of us unfortunately have been brought up with too. In these frenzied times. TV dinners kind of a thing. Just put it in the microwave and cook it. And so on. And so there's a whole range of systemic reasons for why it is that it's very easy to consume those. Okay? And that understanding will help you realize that beating yourself up for doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And by the way, the message that you shouldn't be doing it too is part of the message which is there, easily accessible in society. Everybody tells you this is right, this is wrong, right? So we are basically kind of responding to conditionings that are outside our control, and self-flagellating ourselves without realizing oftentimes that we are just responding to those conditionings in a somewhat automatic fashion. And becoming conscious of that whole process, I think, is the first step. Okay, and once you do become conscious of the whole process, I think one of the things that will happen is that you'll recognize that, look, what I consider to be tasty need not necessarily be the only thing that I consider to be tasty. So this beautiful, luscious-looking cake, which is very, very unhealthy for me, high on processed food, sugars, etc. I also like apples, actually, But whenever I look at an apple, I feel that it's healthy. Oh yeah, I can have it anytime that I want to. And this other thing, this cake, I'm prevented from having it. And that prevention, this idea that something that's forbidden becomes more attractive, right? That pulls you towards it, and so draws you towards it. And then the guilt sometimes adds to that. In an ironic fashion, it makes it more attractive. There's research that shows that when you're feeling negative, you crave foods that are unhealthy for you, or foods that are bad for you, the foods that you associated with this guilty pleasure kind of a thing. And so it's just a very complex set of mechanisms that are operating. And I think that one way to kind of break this cycle is through a combination of self-compassion, which comes from understanding why this is going on, and that in a sense, you're not all to blame for it, and you've been conditioned by forces beyond you that have steered you in that direction, and also kind of recognizing that with patience and with time and being intelligent, you can change that pattern, you know. And so in week 4, the exercise, you know, this is like kind of revealing the punchline in a sense. But the exercise is going to be something that is called leading a healthy lifestyle, you know. And there's 3 big components to it: eating better, sleeping better, and exercising more. And so a big part of that eating better is going to be things that you might think are, you know, like almost straightforward, too trivial, but they're actually very impactful. Just making it easier for yourself to access healthy food. And I think that once you start doing it, and it takes a little bit of time, and practice, but once you start doing it, then you'll just realize that, you know, this whole complicated thing of feeling guilty and attracted and then beating yourself up in this, you know, like vicious cycle can be avoided altogether, you know, or at least mitigated. And then you realize that, yeah, it's there. If I want, I can have it, but I just don't feel like having it, you know, as much. Not like you'll forever never have it, but you just realize that it's not that complicated.
Okay. And then probably if you do have a piece of cake once in a while, you can just be happy without
Yeah,
being guilty.
yeah. I mean, everything in moderation, including moderation.
That's really interesting. Okay. So keeping up with the theme of moderation, we have the last 2 questions coming up. And this one is from Evelyn, who I'm not sure where she is from, location unknown. But she's asking, can someone get so habituated to the 7 deadly sins that they're uncomfortably happy? So what she's trying to ask is there such a thing as being uncomfortably happy?
You know, it reminds me of this song by Pink Floyd.
Oh yes, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Comfortably numb.
Comfortably numb, yeah. So, I saw this show on TV in America a while back called This American Life, where they had this person who was eating really unhealthy food for a very long time. Like, that's all he knew to eat, I guess. And they put him on a diet that was healthier, and his system went through a shock, you know.
Oh.
And so at some level he was comfortable being habituated to unhealthy food. And I guess at some level see how this could happen with respect to goals too. And that if you have a bunch of ideals or values or goals that are actually what I call sins, that don't enhance your happiness levels, but you're so used to them that you're comfortable in the familiarity of those things, you know. And but I actually think that at some level or the other, particularly if you're somewhat self-aware, I think that you're going to realize that you're not happy, you know. So when you're 21 or something, you might say, well, you know, if I had this huge house, this much money, this kind of a wife or husband and all that, then I'm going to be really happy. And you're there, actually. If you were to kind of reflect back on what you thought at that time, you have that life now. But if you examine how happy you are, you would realize you're not that happy, you know. I think that describes most people. So the uncomfortable and the unhappy, you know, not uncomfortably happy, but rather uncomfortable and unhappy. But where I think the more prevalent phenomenon, I think, is that, and Sonia Lyubomirsky describes this in her book, The Myths of Happiness, is that people think when they're 21 or let's say, you know, young, that having these kinds of extrinsic things is going to make me happy, and they're there now. And then they reflect and say, well, why am I not happy? I thought these are going to make me happy. And the mistake that they make is that if I just get a little more, you know, well, I thought $1 million is going to make me happy. No, it's actually 2 million, you know. I thought this kind of a house is going to make me, no, it's a house with a swimming pool. One more thing, it's going to make me happy. So they keep continuing on that path without questioning the validity of the theory in the first place. I think that's more prevalent. And so I would say that in my experience at least, you know, I haven't seen that many people who are not even aware that they are unhappy. Okay. It's rather that they are aware that something is wrong, something is missing, there's a hole, but that they are still convinced of the theory that what will lead to the happiness is that if you just keep running more on that same path, it's just around the corner, you know.
So they're perpetually in transit, never reaching station happiness.
Right. At some level, yeah, you can call it that, yeah.
Okay. So we are down to our final question, and this one is from Roshni. She asks, as I understand it, a happy person is someone who's happy most of the time. Is there a definition or measurement for most of the time? That's interesting.
Yeah, so as it turns out, there's actually some researchers that have looked at that specific question.
Okay.
And Barbara Fredrickson from UNC and her colleague Losada, they've looked at this, and basically what they've concluded is that that the ratio of positivity to negativity for you to be able to thrive is 3:1. Okay, so you need to feel happy about 3 times more in your life than you, or positive 3 times more than you feel negative.
Okay.
When it's less than 3:1, then there's a danger that the negativity is going to be more prominent. Okay, and the reason for this is that what they call negativity dominance. Maybe they don't call it that, but basically there's this concept of negativity dominance, and the idea is that negative emotions are more intense, right? And you might be able to empathize with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the idea is that if you lose $10, let's say, from your wallet, you open your wallet and you see $10 is missing, the pain that you experience is more intense than you open your wallet and you find $10, right?
Yeah.
So negative events have much more of an impact. We are focused on negative events more. But the good news is, for most people, this is offset by what actually they call positivity offset, which is that even though negativity is more intense, positivity is more prevalent. Even though it's more subtle, you experience positivity for a longer duration or more frequently in your life. Most of the time, most people, if you ask them, yeah, things are going well. You know, of course, you know, there are lots of people for whom that's not true. But on average, for example, if you look at happiness scales around the world, people on average are about a 6.5, you know, 6.6. So above the mean of 5, you know. So for most people, most of the time, things are going well. If you ask them how are things going, they're saying good, you know. So, but what they say is that for you to achieve the, be in a situation where you're flourishing and thriving, it's 3:1. So 75% of the time, if things are good and you're feeling happy, that's a good life. Then you're starting to thrive. Below that, perhaps not.
Okay. So on that really happy note about the measurement of most of the time of happiness, we'll wrap it up. That's about all the questions we had today. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Professor Raj, for answering all our questions.
Thank you for asking me the questions.
I had great fun sitting with Professor Raj here and trying to understand more about this happiness theory. And I hope you found his answers useful and insightful. We'd request you to keep your questions coming in as we try to do this every weekend if possible. And we'll keep you posted about that. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you once again, Professor Raj.
Thank you. Thank you, Soumya. Appreciate it.